Okay, so this is how you actually create the ripple transition stuff quick and dirty. Did I just say quick and dirty? Now, let's drop this. First thing we're gonna drop is a VOPS op. This is what's gonna be responsible eventually for the rotations and stuff, but I might go and set up the stuff that's necessary. So I'm gonna drop a box over here, and I'm gonna drop a transform right after that, and plug that in accordingly. And lastly, I'm gonna drop in a copy swap. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and resize my node over here to a better size. That sounds good. And for one, we're gonna be using a pattern eventually, so I'm gonna go ahead and drop a UV texture while I'm at it over here. So UV texture, and I'm gonna go ahead and define an attribute which is gonna write all the values out eventually. So I'm gonna drop in an attribute create. The reason for dropping the attribute create over here is just to give it a name. So in my case, I'm gonna just name it rotation, and I'm not gonna give it any values because VOPS is actually gonna I'm gonna go ahead and copy this guy, jump inside VOPS, and that's the name that we're actually gonna create the values from. So I'm gonna maximize this viewport over here, and we're gonna begin this whole thing by importing our UV data. So import attribute, or if you want to actually go to geometry, you can import the attribute, and the attribute's name in our case is actually press P on the keyboard and say UV. All right, all in small letters, and it's on up index 0. The input is actually up index 0, this being the indexes 0, 1, 2, and 3. So 0 is the first part where the data is coming in. So we got our data as the UV data, which actually is UV and W, but we just need the two first floats, so we're gonna strip it down to vector to float. So vector to float. So now what you have eventually is a U, V, and W data. So now the way you're gonna actually manipulate this is under the patterns. We got something called soft dots over here. So soft dots is gonna ask for, usually this is in the materials, I don't know what they actually stand for, but that's what the data plugs into. The U and the V respectively plug into the S and T. Now the dot size is what's gonna be responsible for the size of the ripple of the wave, whatever you want to call it. So I'm gonna create a parameter node out of this, and you can call it anything. You don't have to call it dot size, you can call it wave size or something like that, but no, we are not renaming anything. So we can actually visualize the color for this. So we can actually just go ahead and plug in the output onto this, see how it looks. And for one, it's actually on the VOP, so I'm go back to the VOP, and you can see it's a black and white image, which you can actually increase the sizes. So now the thing is, everything over here is already a 0 to 1 value, being the black values that you got over here are 0, and the 1 values you got over here actually white. So the 0 1 range, which you usually in 3D graphics you usually try to get, is already mapped out for you. So it's already predefined, so to speak. So now what you need to do with this, you can actually, I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect this guy, is under generic you got something called fit range, which can remap values to new values, pretty much more like a fit expression. Now I'm gonna press P on the keyboard, and if I look at the source minimum and the source maximum is the same thing that we have over here, so pretty much that's already defined, but the new maximum and the new minimum is gonna be different. So our new minimum is gonna be 0, that's gonna be the same, but the new maximum is going to be 180. So pretty much it'll be like a flip from 0 to 180. So we're going to have this rotation values rotate from 0 to 180. So pretty much going to be flipping from one side to the other side. And now we can actually go ahead and drop in an attribute. So we're going to go geometry and add an attribute over here. So add attribute, and you can just plug this in over here, and even though it's a vector, Houdini will just do the automatic conversion for you. And did I copy that name over there? I don't even remember. So I'm gonna just copy that name and come and paste it over here. So pretty much what you're saying is Houdini is gonna just remap all the values coming out from over here, which is the 0 to 180 to the rotation value. So it's gonna overwrite everything that the attribute create did earlier. Now we can actually stamp the features out, stamp the functions out, or the rotate value which we got over here. We can go ahead and stamp it. So we can stamp features and call this rot, and the name is actually gonna be the rotation, so it's gonna be rotation. Making sure you typed everything correctly. It turned orange, I mean yellow, so that means everything is good. Now you can actually stamp the features over here. I'm gonna go ahead and regular mode over here, go to my transform and actually look who we want to rotate. So if I rotate the X value, that looks good. So we're gonna put the stamp feature over here, so stamp, and what we're gonna be stamping is the copy swap. So copy one, so open up the quote things and copy one, and the default token is well, the string token in our case is actually called ROT, and the default values are 0, and enter. Now what you have is the same thing all over again, a grid which actually rotates, and as you can see it rotates the same way as earlier, only this one is much faster. Now you could actually implement some few things over here, and I know most of you don't have a if I can get this thing to come up, most of you don't have this, but it's more like it just gets the pictures straight up. Actually, I'm not even gonna use that. I'm gonna just go ahead and use a color and plug that in over here, and it's gonna be a point color. It's gonna be going to VOPS, so I'm gonna plug that into VOPS. Actually, I was planning to plug it on VOP input number 1. I'm gonna make it red, so pretty much now you have a red grid, and then I'm gonna drop another one which is gonna be blue or green, whichever one you feel like, and visualize that, and now you have a blue grid. I'm gonna plug that output to that. Alright, so what you have is one grid, plug it into the first port, which is port index number 1, and the second one, plug it into the second index. So now jumping into VOPS, you can actually color the primitives accordingly. So you can do a compare node. So under workflow, you can get a compare node, so workflow compare, and don't forget the value coming out of this is actually 0 to 180, so you can compare and see whether the value is actually greater than or equal to whichever one you feel like. So 160, let's say, greater than 160, and if it's greater than 160, what you want to do is do a two-way switch. So this is a boolean value of 0 to 1, so it outputs a 0 inputs to the condition over here. So being the values at 0 to 1 output, it actually outputs a true value on the first port and the false value on the second port. Now I can go to my geometry and import attributes from the two grids which we just created, which will be the color attributes, but it's not from index 0 but from index 1. So the index 1 is going to be the red color, so that's going to plug it into the first port. Then I'm going to drop in the same thing all over again, and one more time, this is going to be from the second index, so index number 2. Make sure it's index number 2, and then plug that in over here. And all these are color attributes, so you can actually just go ahead and plug this into the color right here. And now what you should have is, if I go back to my copy swap, is actually I need to actually go to my attribute and let the attributes actually pass through. So use template point attributes, and now what you have is one being red and another one being blue. Now you can actually go ahead and play with this, and yes, it animates the same way. So that's the quick and dirty way to actually do all of this kind of stuff. So I'm out on this one. Hope you had fun. It was quick, yes I know, but we had to do it like that. Now Ghetto Man style out. Cheer.